Hello there, everyone, and welcome to What the Fuck Have We Done? Pigeoncast's UK-based discussion show. My name is Rat, and I'll be your host today. On today's episode, we'll be covering the situation in Ukraine, the build-up, the most recent defining events, and a few ways you can help those caught up in the conflict, as well as a little mini-topic regarding the media impact on global crisis situations. So, just in case you live off the grid or find watching the news to be simply too much, I'll give you a quick recap on how this awful situation all kicked off. On February 24th, 2022, Russia launched a full-blown military invasion against Ukraine, attempting to justify it with accusations of Nazi groups being present within Ukraine, something which is entirely untrue. Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement pertaining to this military action was followed by explosions in Kiev, Kharkiv, Odessa, and Donbas, as well as Russian military vehicles entering Ukraine from the border with Crimea. In the time since the announcement of this conflict, there have been ongoing attacks and outright military sieges, as the Russian military attempt to claim and occupy key cities and areas of Ukraine, forcing the Ukrainian population to flee their homes for safety in other countries. Many have left not knowing whether they will have homes to return to as Russian bombings continue to decimate their home cities. Now, there is no easy way of choosing particularly key events in an awful conflict like this, so I have chosen a particular event which certainly drew my personal attention, and I'll give you a bit of a review of it. So, in the last couple of months, there have been continued Russian attacks on various locations in Ukraine. And on June 27th, and forgive my pronunciation of this because I'm sure it's wrong, Kremenchuk, a shopping centre was struck by two Russian X-22 missiles. The attack resulted in the absolute tragic loss of about 20 lives and the severe injury of 59 other civilians. Ukrainian officials estimate that approximately 1,000 people were present in the shopping centre when the attack occurred, giving it a devastating effect not only through loss of life, but also through destructive trauma to all the lives and witnesses that had to endure that act of cruelty. Videos taken at the scene of the attack revealed plumes of black smoke and flames rising from the destroyed shopping centre. It was later revealed that another missile had struck a nearby factory in the area that was fortunately closed, preventing any further loss of life in this absolutely abhorrent incident. A response from Ukrainian President Zelensky saw him refer to Russia as the largest terror organization in the world, as he proclaimed that it was absolute insanity that had to be required to strike such a location. Zelensky continues to press world leaders, including those in the United States and greater areas of Europe, for more advanced anti-aircraft systems in order to protect Ukraine from Russian air attacks. A statement from the Russian government claimed that the shopping centre caught fire following a Russian attack on what they claimed was a nearby weapons depot. This has been rejected by Ukrainian officials as being entirely false and another example of Russian propaganda. Now, this isn't even the first time the Russians have been accused of using such propaganda during this conflict, as with a lot of cases of these bombardment attacks and missile strikes that have been occurring pretty much continuously since the conflict began. The Russians have claimed that they have been aiming for things like military stockpiles or ammunitions depots, things like that. But the reality is, certainly from the research that I myself was doing on this topic while writing up my little script for this, revealed that more often than not, in most cases, these bombardments are actually striking civilian targets, such as housing buildings, hospitals, or schools. And that note, sad as it is, actually brings me quite nicely on to my next little segment, which has been aptly titled Rat's Rant. And this little section is where I stop providing you with an outline of what happened and we move on to the part of the episode where my opinion starts to bleed through. Now, the first thing is that I do not hesitate to state that attacks like this are still happening and Ukraine is still actively under siege. This is just a particular attack that I felt highlighted the point quite nicely. And I don't know about all of you listening currently, but I recall that when this conflict first started, the sheer amount of media attention that the Ukraine conflict gained when the military aggression from Russia began was absolutely overwhelming. I recall the outpourings of support for Ukraine and the condemnation of Russia on social media. Information was everywhere. There were charity drives and talks of people offering up their homes to house those who had been forced to flee. But I also recall how all of that sort of slowed down and stopped over the months as main media outlets started to find other things to talk about, whether that be TV shows coming back, such as Love Island, or certain musicians going on tour. And that brings me quite nicely onto the mini topic today, which is how media attention impacts these global crisis situations that we have going on in the world these days. And particularly, something I find fascinating is that with the rise of social media came an increasing consciousness of global events occurring outside the countries we call home. We've become more aware of our world and have gained the potential to be more informed than we ever have been in the past. However, this seems like it's come with a bit of a downside because many media outlets have diverted back to an almost kind of Victorian penny dreadful method of getting views and selling copies, often turning our attention to the doom and gloom while not giving us any advice in how we as individuals and audiences can contribute to efforts to help. There's also a lot of topic jumping, with stories getting coverage for only a few days before something else has caught the attention of cameras and reporters. When it came to the Ukraine crisis, we saw outpourings of support fade away in favour of social media controversies, politics in our own homes, bands and artists being on tour, Love Island returning to our television screens, and now there are faded blue and yellow flags stuck up in windows by a lot of people who put them up and then forgot about the people that they put them up for, because the collective attention of the people consuming uh, our media have moved on to other things. Of course, it's not all bad. There are still quite a lot of good things happening, even though the cameras aren't necessarily focused on them. For example, if we think of Poland and other European countries continuing to assist Ukraine by taking refugees without question and without the need for legal documents, or by offering supplies, whether that be food, medical, or even military supplies in some cases. In addition to that, we have seen some absolutely fantastic efforts from charities such as Doctors Without Borders, who have gone out of their way to build what is essentially a hospital train that is capable of going into Ukraine to treat the wounded of both military and civilian natures, while also protecting them from potential attack. And I don't know about you in the audience, but I think it would be much nicer to see more information about that sort of thing on the news rather than just the doom and gloom. Because the reality is that this conflict has not gone away. It has not stopped just because we have kind of looked away from what's happening. These acts of unjustified violence and destruction are definitely deserving of our awareness and our attention, because our fellow human beings are being left without food, shelter, heating, and medical care in a lot of cases. And obviously, I'm not saying that one person can change the world, and I'm not expecting any kind of miracle that anyone's going to go out to perform. But I do think that it should be made a little bit easier for people to find ways to help. So if you can, I ask you to have a look at the following charities to see if you can help in any way. The Ukraine Crisis Appeal via the Red Cross, the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal via DEC, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, Doctors Without Borders. These charities are doing absolutely essential work in terms of helping people. And although you may not be able to go out and volunteer, and in fact, I wouldn't recommend doing that for the sake of your own safety, it's amazing how even volunteering just a little bit of your time at a fundraiser or offering a couple of coins here and there as an extra donation, it's amazing how much that can actually contribute to an effort. So I encourage you to think about it. So, everyone, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of What the Fuck Have We Done? The show where an opinionated British person chats about anything and everything. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this little pilot episode, and I hope to return soon with more content for you. This is Rat, signing off from across the pond. Goodbye, everyone. Keep thinking.